Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Nostalgia Trap podcast. My name is David Parsons, and one of my nostalgia traps, probably the primary nostalgia trap of my professional life, is academia itself, the history of academia. I tend to romanticize, idealize, and I think probably distort a little bit of what academia must have been like in the older days. And by older days, I mean going back to like the days that you read about in Catcher in the Rye, like the 1940s, I think the late 40s. I often say that 1947 is my fantasy of academia, being in academia, despite the fact that it was probably disgustingly retrograde, white male, patriarchal, gross in every way. There's still, the part of me, that's why I think is why I call it the nostalgia trap, is that process of idealizing the past often distorts how some of the elements of the era were shitty, to put it lightly. So I have to be careful when I think about that fantasy, but nonetheless, I think it reflects something about me that is the reason I got into academia in the first place, which is, I kind of, I have an idealistic fantasy about the life of the mind, and I actually like, reading, writing, learning, teaching, and especially teaching. And those things are things that I hold to as kind of a pure love. I do it for that, even though I'd like to earn a living wage doing it. My guest today is someone who I think shares a little bit of that feeling of really actually liking and being enriched by the process of reading, writing, learning, and teaching. His name is Christopher Silsby. He's a graduate student who is someone who is a communication fellow, a senior communication fellow at the Bernard L. Schwartz Communication Institute, where I've been working for a few years. And he's someone who I've always really appreciated as a solid guy. He is someone who I can depend on to write amazing blog posts, help me out with any technological issue, and be a presence in the institute that is strong and sure and steady. I know he'll be embarrassed by me saying that, but Chris is someone who I feel like I can depend on in a lot of different ways. He's a really smart dude. He's someone who is writing a dissertation in the theater department at the CUNY Graduate Center right now, and he took a little bit of time away from during this semester, I think right before spring break, which was really late spring break this year, and I think we comment on that. We sat down and talked a little bit about where he comes from, what his work is about, and what his philosophy is about teaching. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Christopher Silsby. He's a guy, again, that I really enjoyed talking to. So this is me and Christopher Silsby talking about CUNY, growing up in the Midwest, and what he's up to as he moves forward in his career. Thanks, as always, for listening to the podcast. You can find more on the Stitcher Radio Network. That's at Stitcher.com. You can also go like the Nostalgia Trap Facebook page for updates and new episodes. And you can, of course, find most of the episodes, or all the episodes, are up on the blog at nostalgiatrap.libsyn.com. So go out there and enjoy the rest of the episodes, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks, as always, for listening. I know you're from the Midwest, is that right?
Yes.
Did you spend your whole childhood and youth in the
My
Midwest?
whole childhood and youth in Kansas, and then went to college in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So Midwest until I got here.
Growing up in the Midwest, what was how did you imagine New York City? It's a question I always ask, because for me, I'm not from New York either. And, growing up, New York City was a scary place in the sense that it was the 80s and early 90s, and New York was not portrayed in the culture as a particularly friendly place. Do you have memories of New York?
I don't remember it being really scary. I mean, yeah, of course, like Warriors and that kind of thing.
Right.
But maybe it's just because I was involved in theater.
Yeah.
That kind of had a very, different view of the way New York.
Well, when did theater happen for you? Was that something like, were you little Max Fisher doing one acts about Watergate in second grade, or where did that come from?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'd always done it.
Yeah.
I mean, by always, meaning think it was 4th or 5th grade,
Mm-hmm.
was in the high school production of Music Man as one of the
And
children.
so your entryway into theater was like the rest of us being forced to perform in plays.
Not being forced to.
Well, having the opportunity to. Let's
Yes,
put it that
okay.
way. And you relish the performance part of it.
Yeah,
Is what
I
I'm
enjoyed
saying.
doing
You
it.
weren't. In other words, you weren't behind the scenes right away, because I don't
Right.
think you envision yourself as necessarily a performer today.
Well, I mean, I just don't have the time, really,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
in grad school. So, I can't commit to
There's always
full
busking
productions.
in the subway.
Yes, that is something that I've thought about helping to supplement my extreme fellowship.
Have you really, or are you
that I
just
have.
joking?
No.
Have you really thought about going to the subway? Because I've
No.
actually considered it. And my wife thinks I'm completely nuts to actually think about going down the subway with an acoustic guitar and singing folk songs.
Yeah, no, as a performer, I really do not think about doing that because it seems unfair to my audiences if I were
Yeah.
to perform in a place where they cannot run away.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been a few of the buskers that I was very pleased with, and I thought were great. I mean,
They're fantastic, some of them here in New York
there's
City.
a countertenor, like singing some soprano arias
Mm-hmm.
on one subway. I don't know if you've.
Yeah, I think I've seen so many different kinds of
Yeah.
performances. I saw an old man down. If you go to the 7th train at 42nd Street, you have
Mm-hmm.
the 7 train. You have to. I mean, it's probably one of the most subterranean of the trains because you have to. He's like, go down 2 more levels, 2 more levels, 2 more levels, and by the time you get down there, you feel you're like close to hell. And there's there was a last week when I went down there was an old man and an old woman. He was playing a harp and she was singing, and it was the most surreal and
On the
beautiful.
platform or
Yeah,
in the train?
on the platform with a big giant harp. I mean, literally, I don't know how the hell they got it down there, but these were old people. These people looked like they were in their 70s or 80s, and they were going for it, and they were doing some really weird, like the kind of stuff you would see on PBS in the 1970s. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like weird, kind of almost disturbing in how out of time and out of place it seemed, but it was awesome, and I think they seemed to be raking it in. I mean, they had a bucket of cash.
Yeah.
That's something wonderful about,
I think
about that.
Yeah, the more different, and I like the way the phrase used, out of time.
Yeah.
That you can be as
Yeah.
a busker. I think the less people are going to be annoyed with the way that you're interrupting their daily commute.
Like if you're singing acoustic versions of top 40 hits, it's not as
Right. I mean, if it's something
not as
that
much of
another
a treat.
exactly, if it's something that another busker could do, or that you've seen somebody do, or that you've seen the same person do over and over again on your commute every single day,
Right.
it's not something that you're going to be quite as happy to hear.
It tends to lose its luster.
Yeah,
Put it
like
that
when I
way.
first moved to New York,
Yeah.
or first moved to Queens, I loved the mariachi bands that would
Yeah.
come onto my train.
Oh yeah.
And
And
that
now
quickly
that becomes a
faded.
grating sound to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things with New York that you struggle between the love and the hate and the light and the dark with New York. And for me, it's kind of like they have to both be there to make New York
Yeah.
what it is. But yeah, there are times where the city really, it almost like it forces itself upon you in a strange way. The city is just kind of in your face, in your eyes, in your ears, and there's really not much you can do about it. Okay.
Well, you either, engage with it, or you put your head down and ignore it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and put your headphones on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Whether you have anything playing in them or not.
in that sense, New York is like a, I don't know, it's an organism that takes some contending with. I guess that's true of all places. When you were in the Midwest, when you were young, what kind of kid were you in 5th grade, in middle school? If we were doing the Freaks and Geeks, what group were you a part of?
I was definitely in the nerds.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I
anybody
asked that of
that's-
a lot of graduate students and academics, and they all were like, I feel like I get the same
Yeah, I mean, you're
answer. Yeah.
You're kind of pre-selecting your answers there.
I'm
but-
sorry. Yeah, it's a leading question. How long have you been beating your wife?
Yeah. No. But yes, I think I. Yeah, I mean,
How did
definitely
you
the
know-
nerds. But
was that an identity that you took on, or is it something that you just kind of realized you were?
well, I mean,
like,
maybe
how do you know you're a nerd in a sense? For me, it was like realizing that I went to the library like voluntarily at
Yeah.
lunchtime.
Well, I mean, for me, it was something. I guess even before I got to middle school, when we started to have to identify ourselves by clique. Although in my middle school was not quite the same way. I didn't feel that.
You go to public schools?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that I was, in that Freaks and Geeks 80s TV show.
It wasn't.
movies.
It wasn't like a stereotype hierarchy,
right? And
we kind of project that onto our memories.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
a way. Yeah.
And the only reason that I'm, think back that I was a nerd is because I really liked computers and math and all of those things that,
What
were
were
part of
computers
that
like?
stereotype.
I mean, it was like Commodore 64s, right?
No, we were, it was the time when Apple was really throwing
Yeah.
lots of money at education.
That's right.
And was making their computers very cheap for education and
Yeah.
expensive for everyone else. So
Was that was their
Using
business
Mac.
plan back then, right?
yeah, they were
I
trying to get us all hooked on it so that we would continue to buy it.
I remember my dad warning me, and my dad still kind of has this like vision of Apple. He's like, "Those are for teachers. Those are only usable in schools." And he still asks me if he can use Google and Microsoft Word and those kinds of things on the Apple products. Is that I think that business plan that you're referring to kind of set a tone for people about like what Apple is, and I think it's changed a lot now. It's not that.
Well, yeah. Once they kind of crashed and they came back with the Steve Jobs
That's
return
right.
era, changing to being a nerdy chic
Yeah.
company. As I notice, you are recording on.
I am
one
on.
right now,
Yeah,
Zoom?
we're on
Yes.
one right now. That's right. I got it through the school. Actually,
Aha.
I think I did. They
you
have
go.
they have school discounts.
Not as much anymore now. It's like you get $5 back or something. But
It's something. Well, what were computers like for you growing up? Like, what were we doing on computers back then? There was no
What were we
internet. I think it's funny because I when I'm sitting here
Oh, no, we had-
with the Mac and the
Yeah.
internet isn't on because the building, it's spring break right now. They're doing like some sort of
That's when they- yeah,
infrastructure.
they said shut down
and
everything.
I'm looking at my computer. I'm like, what's this thing for? Like, what do I even do with a computer if it's not connected to the internet? What did we used to do with them?
well, we had programs that we would put on a disk.
That's
If
right.
you remember what disks are.
Yeah, floppy
And,
disks.
yeah.
DOS. Did you write DOS programs?
Well, I did not write. I wrote BASIC programs.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
QBasic.
Not even QBasic. Just
Basic.
Yeah. QBasic. That's your
The
that's
raw
your
stuff.
fancy Mac side of things. There. No, I would just 10 run. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Did you? Do you remember?
Logo. That was another big one we did.
That's right. Logo. Do you remember thinking that you were going to do something with computers when you were older? Were you a video game player when you were young?
I played. I played games. Whether I would call myself a video gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I was never one of the people that got into Doom and all that kind of first-person shooter things. But
Right.
I really liked the Sierra Online, which was not really online, but that was the name of their company.
That's right.
The Sierra games.
Yeah.
I was a big King's Quest
Okay.
player. I think I eventually bought all of them. Kind of played them in reverse order though. But
So are you a fan? Is that fantasy stuff?
fantasy, problem solving, role playing.
Were you a fantasy person, role playing type person? Did you like Lord of the Rings?
I read them.
Yeah.
I like them.
See, I didn't even read them, so like reading them, I think is alone, so like something, right?
Yeah.
It takes you more into that realm.
But I never played any live RPG based on that
Dungeons
kind
and
of stuff.
Dragons
Yeah,
or
never-
anything like that.
Yeah, I never did any of that. But on the computer,
Yeah.
where I wouldn't have to interact with actual other human beings, I could.
Was that part of the computer thing for you? Because it's another thing I think that I've heard from a lot of graduate students and academics is like, well, I was lonely as a child, and these things offered me companionship, like books and computers. Was that for you, or were these things that
No.
more of like a positive thing?
No, I think they were
I mean,
positive.
they're
And in
always
fact,
positive, I think, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but,
not so much escapist.
But I think that was also part of my why I consider myself, a nerd in middle school and all that kind of thing. My friends were also involved in this,
Yeah.
and so we could talk about them over lunch table or
Mm-hmm.
in class when we're working on technology unit or whatever it was. So it was something that we were all interested in, all involved
Yeah.
in, and we could swap stories about, oh, did you know about this bulletin board system? You can, if you dial in this number and you can read these files and that kind of stuff. So we would, it was the opposite of that. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was actually community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was not because I was not having to interact with other people, but it gave me this language and a common experience.
Yeah,
that I
like
could
a
interact with other
shared
people.
interest thing.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things about the internet that I think about a lot is that it allowed subcultures to grow in a sense. As much as we tend to think of, people on the internet, spending a lot of time on the internet, or involved in role-playing games, or sitting at home, playing on a screen rather than being out. We tend to have this kind of like this idea that people on the internet are lonely, but there's also like an incredible amount of connection people have found. I feel like that it doesn't have to be that. So as you move forward in your education, how did the aesthetic element kind of come into your life? Because it seems like you're the kind of person that, as much as you like computers, you're also interested in the arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
where did that passion come from? Is that something that was in were your parents involved in this, or was it something that you had to kind of find on your own?
No, my family has always been very supportive of the arts and
Mm-hmm.
supportive of my choice to do theater. And I mean,
Is
music
there theater
has been,
in your family?
my mother did
Uh-huh.
a lot of theater.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother and everybody, sings, and so that was a big thing in our family too.
Do you sing? I'm not going to ask you to
yes.
sing. You do
Yeah.
sing. When did that become more of a go from being an interest of yours to something that you actually wanted to pursue more seriously? Were you a drama person in high school?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was your group. That's the Freaks and Geeks group.
Yeah. Well,
It was at our school, at least. There was a particular charge around the quote unquote drama people.
Yeah. Well, we had. I mean, maybe it's because I was involved in all of these different sub cliques in high school, but I did theater and I did music, which there was overlap, but it was not the same
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
group. And then the people taking all of the honors and AP classes was another group, and then there were the people that just happened to be sitting together. Oh, an orchestra too. That was another one of my groups. And then the people who happened to sit together because they were in a few of the same classes, whether they were otherwise in the same cliques or not.
Did you think that
Sorry, I'm like not adhering to the
stereotypes?
subcultures. Yeah, the subcultures.
I think that
way that
actually,
you wanna
for me,
discuss this, but-
I don't think I needed to hear that you were,
know.
exactly fit into the plot of a TV show.
Exactly.
But
it makes it harder to talk about it. That's,
it's true. That's just something strange about that. Like why we have to kind of put our life stories in the terms of a kind of narrative that you think people will understand, and so we have to cite TV shows and movies to kind of it was like this or it was like that. It was like The Breakfast Club, but not really.
Yeah.
So when you were in high school, I assume you're about the same age as I am, or close to that. Was it it was the 90s in high school? It was like
Yes.
Bill Clinton era,
Yeah.
Seinfeld era. What there was a lot going on in the world during that time, both culturally and politically. Do you remember anything about like how you were starting to be aware of the world around you outside of Kansas? Were you a person that read the news a lot? Because I know you seem like a person that's very up to date on what's going on, and I feel like when I see you at work, I can always ask you about something that was in the paper today, and you're going to know. Did you remember reading the paper a lot? And when did you find that interest?
I don't remember.
Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky. Is that when we all came online and figured it out?
Well, I don't. I mean, there's one. I remember the news as TV broadcasts in the evenings.
Yes.
But
TV news being much more of a kind of central place,
right?
Like they're gonna like at night. Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw,
Dan
was
Rather,
ours,
yeah,
they're gonna tell you,
and
then Brian Williams. All right, so
But I did read. I skimmed the newspaper. I guess
I say that because I could not wait to read the newspaper when I was a kid in the morning time. Like I couldn't wait to come down. There was something immediate about like figuring out what was going on. I mean, a lot of it was little flashes of things, especially like celebrity deaths. I remember a lot about like I remember coming downstairs and reading that Sam Kinison had died in the newspaper, and realizing like that nowadays you would hear that on Twitter or on Facebook immediately. And it was more like I had to have it delivered to my house via paper.
Okay. Oh, and that actually reminds me. You were talking about, I don't know why Sam Kinison. Maybe just the audio part of it made me think of this.
Yeah.
But where I got my news when I was growing up is in the car or on the radio.
So like NPR. Yeah.
It was, it was on in the morning. It was kind of the background for when you were getting ready. You were hearing what was going on in the world. And then you had to drive to work because I lived in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had NPR on in the car. Sorry, not to work, to school.
Yeah.
So you had NPR on in the car while you're doing that. So that's
so your
really
parents
where
or
I
the
had
people
news.
driving you to school were NPR listeners.
And then when I started driving as a high school student, that is what I just continued to listen to.
That's awesome.
So that's where I got my my news when I was in high school.
So how'd you end up going to college in Minnesota? I mean, I imagine Minnesota would be a more natural place to go when you're already in the Midwest. I just have I feel like I've had a lot of intersection with people in Minnesota for one reason or another. How did you end up going there?
I applied to a bunch of small liberal arts. Actually, no, I applied to all different types of schools.
Yeah.
I was not one of these people who knew exactly where I wanted to go to college.
Did you know what you wanted to major in? Were you
no.
like 100% theater, or you were just kind
No.
of?
I mean, I thought I wanted to do math.
Yeah.
So I definitely wanted to have a strong math department when
Right.
whatever school it was I went to. So I applied to
so
some
you're
engineering
more on the
schools.
science end of things. It sounds like
When I
you
started.
you were a STEM person.
STEM.
Yeah. I mean, I say that
we just
because,
had-
like, were you? It took you a. Were you thinking practically, or why were you pursuing science?
Because I was. I liked math. I liked the sort of problem-solving aspects of it,
Right.
and I was good at it in high school and middle school. And so it was just something that it was the subject that I was good at, and so
Yeah.
I figured, okay, that's what you do when you go
Right.
to college. You
Right.
do the stuff that you're good at.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I was going to be a political science and law major. 'Cause
Oh, yes, I've seen the pictures of you from when you were
history.
that age.
Yeah. I mean, that was Alex P. Keaton, young Republican phase for sure. I think that's why I probably ask people about their politics a lot when they were in high school, because I want like some assurance that they also had like embarrassing political thoughts and ideas and things like that. But I find more and more I feel so alone. Like that not everyone had a reactionary conservative phase when they were 16 years old.
Was your family conservative growing up?
A
or?
little bit. I think that the influence of a few friends in high school that were really into Rush Limbaugh and getting caught up in the kind of like conservatism was getting really popular in like 1994 or 5, and whenever I was in like late high school, conservatism was everywhere because Bill Clinton had been elected, and it was not unlike what's going on with Obama now, where all of a sudden people were smacking bumper stickers on the back of their car. I hate Bill Clinton. The one I remember the most was impeach the president and her husband.
Right.
And which is interesting considering like who might be president next year. The nightmare of the 90s coming back if we have a Clinton Bush election.
Oh, that's right.
2000.
Jeb's also.
Yeah,
in that.
Jeb is thinking
That's right.
about running, and we could have a 1992 come
Me too.
back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's why I ask a lot about politics and being young, because I want assurance that we were all young and dumb, but I think some people had it figured out a little bit more than I do. I mean, you were already listening to NPR in high school, so you had a little bit of a grip on it.
I think part of it too is growing up in Kansas, which now has conservative.
Well, Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas, is kind of all about like Kansas
Yeah,
as this
I mean, that was
political
about
testing ground.
And that was about the era when I was growing up. Like that.
Yeah.
That book is about the time period that I grew up in, and now we see what's happening in Kansas.
What is happening in Kansas?
Well, Kansas now has conservative every branch of government. So it really is what that book kind of sets forth as. Oh yes, it's a testing ground where they can try out different political ideas.
Right.
Now it really is okay. Is the conservative Republican position going to work, or is it going to drive everybody out of the state? Is
Right.
it going to bankrupt the state? What is it going to do?
Have we found out yet what the answer is?
Well, see, the problem is that people keep trying to push back. Not necessarily the problem, but people start pushing back, and they, find out that trying to gut the budgets of the schools is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And they're told they have to reallocate their budget.
Yeah, and I mean, if I remember correctly, I mean, that Thomas Frank book kind of talks about how there was this the Republican Party taking over Kansas, and the conservative movement kind of sweeping that area was partially about like gaining all these government contracts for the military-industrial complex, and kind of like the irony of it was that so much of the quote-unquote growth that was happening in Kansas was really just clever politicians kind of funneling federal contracts to the right people.
and that's the problem with the problem with Kansas, to use the name of the book.
Yeah. What's the matter with Kansas? Yeah.
Is that you are trying to merge two things that don't really work together in politics: the conservative, social conservative, far right Christian side,
right,
and then the fiscal conservatives, which they really don't want to be spending money on the same things, but you have to keep the rhetoric up.
That's always been the paradox with the right, it seems like. So, were you, what was it, growing up in Kansas, how did you relate to the churches there? Because it seems like the church is much more of a present kind of social force. What was your relationship to the church?
Well, I grew up Unitarian Universalist. And it sort of, solidified the left, I guess, because it was much easier to find coalition, to find agreement with other people who didn't agree with what was the status quo. So it made for some strong, anti-establishment coalitions, I guess.
So how did that express itself in a church setting? Is that something that you would go and listen to people talk about, like social issues and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that sermons would be on social issues. We'd bring in guest speakers from all over. We'd have Wiccans come in and speak. We'd have.
Did you
Muslim
know
speakers.
that your church was different in
yes.
the sense of
Yes.
being in Kansas, and there's another kind of outlook on things?
Yes. Just because it was, all around was, we are a Christian nation. We are a Christian state.
Yeah.
You say Merry Christmas, you put up crosses, and nobody has any problem with it.
Right.
So when you see that, and it seems like maybe we shouldn't be doing that, and nobody is saying anything about it except for the people you go to church with, or people that come to your church and talk to you, or in the same coalition with you, then it kind of makes you start to feel a little bit like an outsider, and you try and find those other outsiders that understand that.
And is that something that you think when you think back on it, is your experience with that kind of going to that kind of church growing up, did that impact your own kind of values as you move forward in your life? Because I'm on the inside of it, it's hard for me to say how it affected my values. But well, it had to have. I say that because there is. I assume there's some intersection between your kind of your aesthetic focus and your interest in the arts, and the kind of like social ideas you have and political ideas you have. Unless I'm wrong, and you're just 100% Broadway and 100% entertainment with theater. I think I have to ask you, like, what kind of theater do you do? Like what kind of theater are you interested in? Or did I find out just now that you are show tunes 100%?
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, and maybe that's part of
Not
why...
that show tunes aren't political.
No, and that's part of my dissertation and my research is like looking at the way that the show tunes of different eras really either underlie or are based in the same politics that everything else in the era came from, or are pushing against that, or talk about a certain subculture's expression. I mean, so we can look at things that are popular, popular entertainments.
I agree.
Which theater, not anymore, probably, but at one time was a popular entertainment.
I think theater's still pretty popular. I mean, not in the same way as it used to be. But Book of Mormon is pretty damn big, right?
Yeah, when you can buy a $120 ticket to it.
And I can't.
Yes.
So I'm hoping for... Well, I think they're going to make a movie out of that, actually.
They're going to make a movie out of everything, so it's fine. And which you can watch on your computer and never have to even go to theater to see.
That's right. Perfect. And then theater is dead. Oh, God.
No, but there are other types of theater that I also study. I mean, Russian political theater is one of the areas that I study. So street theaters and this avant-garde, agitprop, that kind of era of theater that really was consciously political and trying to, whether it's propaganda or just socially influenced.
Right.
That's another type of that's not the type of theater I do, because you can't really.
But you do historical work on that? Is that what you're talking about? Like, you in your dissertation, you're gonna are you mixing those things? You're talking about both like that, overtly political theater, like the San Francisco Mime Troupe in the '60s, which I assume a little bit about. If you've heard of them. And then the kind of reading reading the political zeitgeist backwards from these popular works. Like the musical Rocky came up on this show a couple days ago, and Rocky's huge right now. Very popular musical, and they've got the steps, that Rocky jumps up, and it's all singing and dancing, and like. I was
imported from Europe.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Is Rocky from Europe?
Well, they. I shouldn't have brought that up without actually knowing this much more about it, but I know that it was in Europe first, and then it came here. So whether it was written by Europeans and then brought to the U.S., or it was a U.S. show that went to Europe first to tryouts and then came back.
Yeah.
But still, either way, there's
a reason why Rocky's popular. Right now.
There's transatlantic politics going on here.
Yeah, and I think that's reading that stuff is great for me. I mean, I like to figure out why things are popular as much as I like to figure out the little avant-garde stuff. But in a sense, do you see it? Those that they're not necessarily two separate things in a weird way. That theater is theater in a certain respect. That both are trying to strike a chord inside its audience in some way.
Well, I mean, theater is theater's theater, but the thing you have to think about is who is the show being geared towards? Who is the audience?
Yeah.
Is it something that is trying to entertain first and then teach a lesson? Is it something that is, in Brechtian terms, is it something that's trying to entertain and then teach?
Sure.
Or is it something that is pure entertainment and then we can learn from that, where they're just trying to make money, and what is that telling us? That these are the things they think can make money in a form of theater? Or is it something that doesn't care about making money at all? It's all about making this great piece of political art.
Where is capitalism in there?
Yeah.
And that's something that comes up a lot in film studies too, is the idea of, if a work is designed to make money, what element of it is then devalued? And those are difficult questions. I don't know if you saw last week. I had a kerfluffle about Star Wars on my Facebook page.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you were involved in that a little bit. And I was defriended over that from a couple of different people that were really upset about my my comments about Star Wars. And I don't want to rehash the whole fight, but I did think there was an interesting point about one person had said, you don't do a socio-political analysis of Star Wars. It's Star Wars, and it's pure entertainment, and that's that. Where are you on that idea? I mean, you're a graduate student, so I kind of know where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, that makes no sense. That statement, I can't even parse that in my head. How can you not do a...
Well, I think the idea is it's Star Wars, or it's entertainment. You're supposed to not think about it and just kind of.
But I mean, that's George Lucas was specifically trying to pull in. I mean, what are we going to say that The Hero with a Thousand Faces is something we should not study anymore because of that? I mean, no. I mean, come on.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Along with the problems involved with it,
right.
I know.
I just wanted to add, because I think I was being really kind of polemical and really ridiculous in saying like Star Wars is just a story about like Vietnam War revisionism, and it's a racist diatribe, and people shouldn't watch it. And this goes back
Ho Chi Minh is
Yoda, etc. And I was just kind of. I really actually don't think those issues are enough to dismiss the film and not be entertained by it. Right. But there is something about kind of balancing those things. It's something.
Well, and also this kerfuffle that you dusted up came at the same time that somebody else, one of my friends, was discussing Blade Runner.
Ah, yeah.
And
Blade Runner's got some horrible stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, maybe this is just the, looking back on my childhood science fiction and forgetting how horribly un-PC, I hate that phrase, but how...
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The sociopolitics of it are horrible. Like, somebody was talking about how they cannot watch Blade Runner because of all of the rape culture and misogyny that's involved in it.
And the horrible saxophones, like really, like there's like some like romantic sax stuff going on in that movie that's... very distracting.
Yes. Well, and I realized it had been like 15 years since I'd seen it.
Yeah.
And I was just like remembering the scenes that I wanted to remember from it without actually going back and watching it. And I still haven't gone back and watched it yet. So maybe I should at some point.
Well, like a lot of the movies, I mean, being, if you're going to read old novels from the 19th century, the political attitudes, I assume, that are present in those novels are not going to be consistent with the kind of values that we embrace today. And when I watch movies from the 70s, like Chinatown or Hitchcock movies from the 50s, like Vertigo, these movies the politics in them are absolutely repulsive and actually function in a historical way for me, because I'm like, oh, look at how they envisioned what women were, or what gay people were, or what black people were in these times. So it doesn't really curtail my enjoyment of them. And I guess that that kind of contradicts my point about Star Wars, because I really went after it. I think it's because I was just like, there gets to be some exhaustion about Star Wars in a culture, and I know it's coming. We're gonna
hit it again.
Yeah, we're gonna get new ones again, and it's almost like Harry Potter coming back in 15 years and saying, good Lord, it just never stops.
You're comparing Star Wars to Harry Potter.
Is that okay? Is that not right? I mean, they all have. Is that not a right? Is Harry Potter better than Star Wars to you, or worse? What?
Wait, you're talking to somebody who...
You're acting like there's an obvious answer here.
There is an obvious answer.
Oh, what's the obvious answer?
I mean, Star Wars.
Star Wars is better than Harry Potter?
Of course.
Oh, I didn't know that. I think that there are a lot of people that think those Rowling books are really, really great stuff. Really,
well, okay. And again,
at least they're not racist, Christopher.
Well, I don't know. I mean, actually, I've never read them, so I can't. But so I am, as a true nerd, just speaking completely out of my ass and like saying.
I understand. There's
Harry Potter is.
There's a lot of partisanship in nerd culture. Are you a Star Trek person at all?
See, and that's the thing. Like, I'm both.
Okay,
I'm not one of those. You have to
see. That's
Star
cool.
Wars, or you have
I respect that. I respect balance.
Yeah. To the Force. But no, speaking of Harry Potter, one of the reasons why I never really got into them, like when I started hearing about them, well, first of all, I was too old, but and then they became popular, and I was reacting against that. But the storylines, like in reading them and hearing about them, like, oh, wait a minute, this sounds familiar, because it's the same things that I read growing up, just all put together in one book.
It's like
it's the Silver on the Tree series.
The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Exactly. So maybe Star Wars and Harry Potter are the same.
One of those 1,000 faces is Harry Potter's face.
We need to update that book.
All right. So how do you switch? How do you give yourself the permission in college to say, I'm not going to pursue science and math and engineering. I'm not going to be a STEM person. I'm going to pursue the arts, and I'm going to start trying out for plays. How did that happen for you?
Well, it started off as a extracurricular that I was.
Yeah.
So yes, I was doing my computer science math degree. Oh, so first it went from being just straight math to being math computer science, while doing theater and music on the side, doing it after classes. So like you do in college, you're completely burned out and doing way too much.
A million different things. Yep.
Yeah. So then having to try and choose what your major is going to be, you start trying to winnow down the things that you're focusing on. And I had a very roundabout way of getting to being a theater major. So I started off, math, and then math, computer science, and then religion, and then Russian, and then finally...
Getting closer.
Then finally, we didn't have a theater major. You had to write it yourself.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I ended up taking some of the classes from the English department, some of the classes from the theater department, which we had, but not a major. And then pairing that with some off-campus study. And
was it scary to do that? Because we're here at Baruch, which is kind of a business-centered part of the CUNY educational network, and as a result, I have a lot of students that are doing not so much STEM work, but work that they think is going to give them a career in an office type capacity. And I find that since I'm a history teacher, a humanities teacher out of school like that, lots of students come up to me and they're like, they whisper like, I'd really like to be majoring in history. Or something like that, or humanities, but my parents won't let me, or I'm scared. Was that ever a concern for you, or was it just kind of?
Well, I was working in computer science all the time. I mean, throughout all of this.
So career was already kind of happening in a sense.
So I was working in the systems and networking department at the college, and learning the vocational side of computers, which. Getting a computer science degree is not going to help you with getting a job, because you're learning the theory of computer science and not how to actually fix a computer, how to actually run a server. You're thinking about how to create a computer programming language that will become the next programming language.
Yeah, I mean, I discovered that with film studies in learning that my film studies major was entirely theoretical, and then I had no practical knowledge to go actually down to Hollywood and get a job.
But that's fine for me, at least. Like that's what I found it interesting to take those classes. but I wasn't taking them as vocational education.
Right. It was more of a kind of broad-based humanities education. Yeah.
And actually, this is on Twitter the other day. I kind of got into the middle, not as big of a kerfuffle as you did, but somebody. I wish I had it on me.
A mini dust up.
Yeah, I wish I could actually
bring it up, but we have no internet.
The Twitter names.
It's like the Stone Age around here.
Exactly. But there was some liberal arts scholar, and if you're out there listening to this, I'm sure she is.
Yes.
I'm sorry that I forget what your Twitter handle was, but who was talking about the head of Coke came and was talking about how having a liberal arts degree was the best thing for a business career. And I made some snide retweet. Oh, Graham's, great.
Yeah.
Liberal arts is now, a business degree or whatever.
Right. Everything's a business degree.
Yeah. And her response is, why are you upset? This is what we've been trying to teach our students for generations. I'm like,
yeah. And in a sense, it's kind of like what I've had to embrace teaching in a business school for 10 years is that, this liberal arts stuff is really important base for, and it's what I say to the students that are like, I'm scared about having a humanities degree, and I have to tell them exactly that, which is like a humanities degree or a liberal arts degree is one of the best training you can have for the business world. But yeah, I know there's something that sticks with that.
But it should, it's the best training for whatever you want to apply it to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want that to be business,
best training for being a human being.
Exactly. And if you want that to be business, then great. Go ahead, God bless, give lots of money to your school, and it'll be great.
The way I see a humanities degree is it's the best way to understand what's happening to you when you don't have a job after college. Like it's the best way to start investigating your place in the larger scheme of things. And I say that somewhat jokingly, and I say that in a real way because, when I didn't have a job after graduating from a great 4-year school, when I didn't have a job after a couple of years, the humanities stuff I think led me to investigate a little more about history, a little more about politics and society, and realize that it wasn't just about me and my job, but there was a whole kind of matrix of possibilities out there. So I mean, in a sense, that the liberal arts degree did give me the tools to figure out what was happening in my life. I hope that's true. You teach new media, but have you ever also taught theater, just straight theater classes?
Yeah, I taught acting classes. So.
And how do you approach that in terms of that social mission stuff we were talking about? Like, how does that match in there, if at all, when you're teaching students about theater?
Well, for the acting classes that I teach, it's central to the way that I teach acting, because I base. So it's not just we're going to read these scenes and regurgitate them back on.
Try and make them compelling. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's eventually what we do because that's what you expect out of taking an acting class. But that's not where we start. We start with, watching human behavior, watching the way that people interact. What can you learn about somebody by just looking at them? And what are you watching when you watch people on the street, see how they're interacting, how they carry themselves? What does that tell you about them, about their situation, about their given circumstances, to use a theater buzzword?
Given circumstances.
Given circumstances. That's theater classes love, or acting classes love that term. Thank you, Stanislavski.
I didn't know that.
No, but no, so it's really about the way I approach theater is that you're taking on a role. So in order to understand that role, you have to understand how that character would behave in whatever situation. So that requires social analysis of their position. And most of the plays that people do scenes from are not characters that are necessarily well off. This is about being in a situation where you're in struggle. So are you going to take up a social struggle, or are you going to try and fight against it and get crushed, which happens a lot of times in theater? Are you somehow going to game the system? Are you, what are you doing in this country? Is basically what the way that I approach theater.
That's your starting point. Is kind of figuring out.
Well, I don't put it in quite such stringent social terms, but I mean, it's trying to figure out the context and trying to figure out who you are and what you're doing there.
And is there like for me, it's like there's a self-conscious aspect to becoming a performer that makes you realize that kind of everything is performative, even when we're not, in a performance context. Like you and I are performing right now in some respects. That is kind of like,
and that's what NYU Performance Studies would like you to think about.
So I'm reading. I'm just from your perspective. I'm like touching on some really like some theoretical stuff in some sense. That there's like different schools of thought on this, right?
Yes. And
where are you with all that?
I mean, my training.
If there's
and
a
my
school
background,
that you're a part of that's not NYU.
I guess historiography is really what has been kind of central to the CUNY Graduate Center's way of organizing its theater.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a theater history program, and then with social theory that's brought in, and it's kind of, it's turning more towards sociology of theater, I guess now. Which is not quite the same thing as performance studies.
Well, I mean, theater is really hot right now, and I know that. I feel that because there are
good. I get a job.
Yeah, there are just. I feel that I've just encountered a lot of theater people coming out of CUNY lately, and
part of it is
in this
is
fellowship maybe
yeah.
too. Is Baruch maybe likes to hire theater majors? I don't know.
Well, no, I think the center, the Schwartz Institute,
right,
hires many theater people.
Probably because of the oral communication
aspect.
I
just spilled a big
I don't
secret.
I don't think that's a secret. I have a lot of theater people on my Facebook, and I don't know if you have an opinion on this or where you're at, but it seems like I'm picking up that like wrestling is a hot topic these days. Like Ultimate Warrior died last week. Do you know anything about this?
Mm-hmm. Wait, about wrestling being a hot topic, or about
wrestling
being
a hot topic? Oh. Yeah.
I mean,
where are you on
there's
wrestling?
Somebody in our program that is writing his dissertation on the history of wrestling. So
yeah,
could be.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
But that's probably one of the people I've thought about with it. But it's more than that.
Can we say names? Then
it's Arrow, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to scoop his dissertation. If somebody was. Okay.
No, I think that's.
Okay.
I actually talked to Arrow's wife last week, and she's one of these podcast episodes, and I hope to talk to him eventually too. Maybe I can ask him. What's going on in wrestling?
Well, I mean, theater's always been very interested in wrestling. I mean, you go back to Brecht, who really liked boxing and kind of manly sports like that, and Roland Barthes.
Pugilism.
Yeah, and Roland Barthes stuff. I mean,
what's Bart say about wrestling?
Wait, was it Bart? Crap, now
he's the death of the author guy.
Yeah.
See, now we're getting into some high theory.
I should have studied this. I should have prepped myself before I brought it up.
I always tend to bring up like a theorist's name sometimes. And I'm like, it's like Foucault says, know, and like, they're like, what did Foucault say? Something about prison, I think, maybe sadomasochism. But I think I got what you're saying about when you bring up Roland Barthes.
But it's like, because we're looking at.
This isn't our orals.
What?
This isn't our orals. We don't have to know it all.
Yeah, as long as my professors aren't listening to this. But because, I mean, it's this story that is told, and yet we're not told that it's a story. And over the past decade, really, wrestling has gone through this shift from, I know you really should talk to Era about this, but it gone through a shift from the Attitude Era, where it was kind of laying bare the fact that it was this story line.
Right.
It's fictional. We know it's fictional. We're letting you know that we know it's fictional. And so we're letting you know that we write these stories. And so the author's made visible.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's kind of like this post-author era now, where they're even engaging the people who are starting to figure out where it's going to go next. And that was one of the big things at WrestleMania. I don't know if you read anything about.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like theater for me, and becoming friends with theater people over the course of the last few years has made me realize how much theater is around us in ways that you don't really think about. I think that's what it was for me. Is that wrestling is a pretty what you just described is a pretty advanced kind of meta engagement with the idea of narrative.
Right.
And now I'm getting why graduate students are into wrestling. It's like it's not just that we love Hulk Hogan, but there's something really complex going on there.
And then you get to bring in all of our wonderful theories. You get to bring in your socioeconomic theory. You get to bring in
and the stuff
performance theory,
the Roland Barthes and the Michel Foucault that you make sure to read before you write about.
Right, exactly.
So, can you talk about your dissertation a little bit more? I know this isn't a job interview, so you don't have to talk about it that way. But I kind of more interested in how you came to your idea for your dissertation. How'd you figure that out? What is it about Christopher Silsby that led him to write that stuff?
Well, what actually happened was my 4 or 5 different areas where I was really interested in these topics sort of came together, and I just happened upon the overlap, which because like first
nice
couple
when that
years,
happens.
the first couple of years it was really about just studying for the exams and trying to memorize everything about all of theater history. But then when I started to really focus in on what am I going to write my dissertation about, my interests in musical theater, popular culture, Russian political theater, African American theater, started to overlap, and I found the areas where there are African American figures who left the United States and went to Stalinist Russia, and so I decided, wait a minute, this is exactly everything that I've been thinking I wanted to write about and couldn't figure out how to bring together. This is that.
Yeah, that.
And
so you're interested in that kind of exchange, and it's not only it's exchange on many levels going on there.
It's people who went and stayed, people who went and came back, people who toured.
This is more than Paul Robeson, right? Because
Paul Robeson is big in my dissertation, but
he's the only one that I know of.
Exactly, that's who everybody knows about, and that's why I'm using him as kind of an entry to my dissertation. Say, okay, so let's talk about the big issues and use Paul Robeson to outline them, because then everybody who's reading this will be able to follow along, and then we'll try and get into talking about these lesser known figures.
Was that synergy between Black Americans and Stalinist Russia that was going on? I assume this is the 40s and 50s that you're talking about.
It started back
even earlier than that. I mean, there was a kind of relationship between the CP and civil rights groups and stuff like that. Was it always political in the sense that the Black Americans, the African Americans that went over to the Soviet Union, were they always thinking of themselves as political actors in a sense, or were they people who were just pursuing entertainment circuits that were open to them?
That's the thing. Some people were doing one, some people were doing the other.
Some were doing both.
And exactly, some were doing both. And what's interesting to study is what happens in that moment of performance.
Yeah.
Are they, I mean, you cannot remain apolitical, whether it's your intention or not, by the act of performing in the Soviet Union as an American, let alone as an African American. You are, it becomes a political performance, whether you want it to or not. Yeah. And
Billy Joel came up on the podcast last week. Billy Joel going to Moscow and playing in the late '80s at that, and it was like it was my memory of communism falling was look, Billy Joel's going to Russia. They want American songs. They want jeans and cokes. And that was like kind of the Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw narrative that I got. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
And then this morning, I just read that Russia has an overwhelming majority of Russians want to get rid of McDonald's. So.
So it comes full circle. Your relationship to the Soviet Union, like where does that interest come from? Is that something that is recent, or something that was around since you were young?
Well, I mean, growing up in the Cold War and growing up at the end of the Cold War and seeing it end in scary quotation marks,
right? And that being an entirely American victory,
right? Of course, where it goes. So. It's always been with me. Growing up under the Cold War. Even though it was the end of it, so it was not really the 50s, 60s era part of it. But I was hearing about that, and then I also studied Russian in high school. Yeah. So again, it just kind of keeps coming back. Time is circular.
Do you have a Eastern European in your family?
No.
Do you have an Eastern European in your family anywhere?
No. No, we're predominantly northeastern Europe.
So it sounds like your interest in the Soviet Union is kind of political in a sense, right? Is that like you're kind of it allows you to investigate?
It allows me to investigate politics, but also I think it comes from an era from a place of culture, because again, I studied Russian language, and you can't really study Russian language without studying Russian culture. And then as I was studying the culture, Russian theater came into it, and the importance of Russia in global theater can't really be understated. So I think that's where it came from. Yeah. And then the politics kind of come after that for me. So it didn't start from politics. It started from
and so the more you investigate, the more you kind of come to kind of political knowledge about it. It seems
Right.
like.
Yeah.
So where are you now? You're finishing up your dissertation. Is that right? Are you as scared as I am about the end of graduate school?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, actually, no. I guess I'm not
Are
scared.
are you kicking yourself for not staying on the STEM path?
No, no, I'm not. I like a challenge, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Makes life
and I'm also
interesting.
I'm not kicking myself for not staying on the STEM path, because as useful as that term is for trying to unite all of these non-humanities sides of things and how we need to become a leader in the what are we supposed to be saying about STEM? I don't know.
We're supposed to lean into
Right.
STEM. Is a lot? I mean, for those that are listening that aren't into education, STEM is a movement right now.
I should
It's
say
a
that.
science, technology, engineering, and math is what STEM stands for, and it's being promoted as a little
Just
bit.
how to get America back on top in education.
Yeah, I mean, it's got. I hate to use this, but it's true. It's got. Barack Obama's got a kind of Booker T. Washington approach to education reform, in the sense that he thinks that that technical skills and practical skills. I mean, he would be the guy that would have told you not to major in theater. He actually. You saw that art history crack,
yes.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, he had to apologize to art history departments across the nation because he repeated that kind of like shitty thing that people say about the humanities, which is like, oh, way to throw away your college years. You're never going to get a job out of that. You should have gone to welding school. I don't think I need to ask you where you feel about all of that stuff.
Can you hear my eyes rolling
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
microphone here?
Yeah, because like I said, I think in a lot of ways that if we shift the idea of higher education to just it's for jobs, then which is something we're always fighting against in a sense, to hear that from people beyond students and beyond students' parents and actually administrators and things like that, it's really disheartening, because if it's all about jobs, then where's the humanity literally, right?
Right. And from somebody with a humanities degree.
Yeah. Right.
And from a Congress with mostly humanities degrees.
Like
what the business.
It's a really mixed message, because
Exactly.
there's a big poster up in at the counseling center, the student counseling center here at Baruch, that's like says, look at all these people that got liberal arts degrees. It's actually really worth it. And, they show Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and all these different, like, kind of major figures. The Democratic Party, I guess.
Even Republican
heroes,
Party
right?
has,
Steve Jobs. And they say
political science is a humanities degree.
Yeah.
In case we forget, even though it says science.
Well, it's political science is theory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not applied knowledge, so to speak. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed message we're sending our students. And on the one hand, we're saying, let's not devalue humanities, but every message we're getting from the people running education, which are not teachers, is that the humanities will not lead you anywhere job wise. So here we both are at the end of our humanities education, unless we both decide to get double Ph.D. There was a guy in one of my graduate center classes that was getting his third Ph.D. And he was like in his 40s. None of us understood. Literally, like, it was amazing because he couldn't even really relate to other human beings anymore in a non-academic way. Like, he literally, it was kind of incredible to listen to him. He was just like stunning in the level of intelligence, I guess you would call that. He had a grasp on seemingly everything. He had like a philosophy degree and like some sort of STEM degree as well. So it was wide-ranging. So anyway,
he had some sort of communication degree for his third one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
To round it all out, are you if you weren't going to be an academic? Because part of us is like, how are you about that whole alt-ac career track? Are you thinking in that way? Are you like kind of set on a tenure track academic job, or where are you at with all that?
Okay, let's try this third time here, starting again. You can tell I work in communications, right?
Yeah. I want job.
No, alt-ac. Yes, of course I'm trying for that too.
What about alt-ac?
What is that? Just like going to get a job in the real world?
Yeah. How would you feel about that? About leaving academia and being outside of it. Is something you consider at all? Because it's come up in the show before, and academics are like, absolutely not. It is my mission. It is who I am. It's what I want to do. But others are kind of like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll go do something else.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I would draw the line. I would, Whatever I do, I would think it has to have something to do with education.
Yeah.
Just because I've spent so much time within
It's
the academy.
It's what you're
and
trained in. And
it's what I've trained in.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
And that's what I feel passionate about, that this is what we need to.
And why should we have to
make
throw
better.
that dream away? And I mean that seriously.
And yeah. And so if it is an alt-alt-ac, it would still somehow be involved with trying to improve humanities education, trying to improve the humaneness of education,
Yeah.
trying to really bring the human into our education, so it doesn't become just a fill out all these bubbles so that you can get your STEM degree and multiple choice answers will get you money.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and the conversation that's happening right now around, Common Core and austerity, I mean, all those buzzwords just mean the same thing to me, in the sense of like trying to cut education as much as possible. And I know this is a conversation that's been going on our whole lives, in a sense. I mean, we're growing up knowing that there were fights over education. But do you think is it worse now, or are we making a mistake in thinking this is just the part of one long consistent decline? It just seems like the nail is being put in the coffin in a lot of different ways. I know I'm cynical about it.
I mean, that's the thing. I've never been at this level before, so I don't know. I mean, if I had been a grad student in 1995, would I have also felt the same way that I do now about the way that higher education is trying to privatize and, drive out the public, the commons,
and turn education into a profit-making enterprise? Yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
I mean, around that time is when for-profit colleges really started to take off.
Could you ever work for one? A for-profit college? And when you're working for one in 5 years, I'm gonna come back and play this for you. Like, I would never. In other words, like I guess what I'm getting at is that there's principle to what we're doing a little bit, right? And I don't want to like make us martyrs or anything like that, but there is a kind of feeling like I pursued this for a reason beyond just getting a job and paying off my student loans.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I could work, because working for a for-profit college doesn't feel like working for a college in my mind.
Right.
Like,
I agree.
You're teaching classes, but it's not an education. It is.
No, and you have very little control over the way you teach your classes at places like that as well. And I think that having, as much as CUNY can be a tough school in a lot of different ways, and it has an administration that I'm not often in agreement with. It is a public college that I've had, I feel, a great degree of freedom in creating my pedagogy. Is that something you felt as well? I think
sometimes too much freedom.
Yeah. You don't even know what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you're, and again, this is part of the austerity. Exactly. Yeah. But part of the austerity education of most of the classes being taught by adjuncts and most of the classes being filled within the last week of the summer before classes start.
Yeah, and to give a perspective on that, it's what is it, April, and I'm still waiting to figure out if I'm going to have classes for the fall yet. So I literally don't know where my money's coming from in the fall at all, which is a tenuous position to be in.
And I mean, I guess I've been lucky in that the classes that I've taught and the departments I've taught in have told me well in advance.
Yeah.
So I'm saying this knowing from other people that have complained to me about that are in the position where you are.
The adjunct nightmare. Yeah.
Exactly. But where was I going with this? Anyway, but
figuring out. Well, I think we were talking about the level of freedom we have as teachers, and how as going to a for-profit college, it's like I don't know if I'm a teacher anymore, and I don't want to. I don't mean to be offensive to people that are teaching at for-profit colleges, but it just feels like something I don't want to do, and I feel
and also,
is that one of those things people keep saying about, like how the concept of selling out isn't relevant anymore because we're all sold out, and capitalism is how you get things done. But it feels like a little bit of that is there.
But also going back to the for-profit colleges, whether you're a teacher or not, whatever. I mean, you look at the ads on the subway for all these for-profit colleges, and they're not touting that they have world-class educators. They're touting that they have people who make money in the real world and will teach you how to make that money as well.
That's right.
So maybe you're not going to get hired by a for-profit college because they don't want you.
Because I'm not making enough money.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to be successful outside of the world. Well, we have a lot to negotiate, and we have a lot to figure out in education. But thanks so much for sitting down with me, Christopher. I wish you luck in the rest of your career at the Graduate Center and finding something outside of STEM. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. #STEM. See you next time.
Okay. Oh no, hashtag.
Hashtag. What's
You know
hashtag?
that? Hashtag?
What's hashtag?
Humanities, arts, and sciences. What is that the one stand for?
Wow.
You don't know this one?
We just found a real... No, I don't know this one. We just found another
basically just
academic
stands for
buzzword.
everything.
Hashtag stands for everything.
Yeah, it is everything, basically.
I'm going to look
it up.
I'm going to
Google
look that up and figure out the next step in our education here. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.